Sachin Tendulkar holds the records for the most test runs and the most centuries in the history of cricket. By the end of his career, he was widely regarded as a modern sporting deity. But the foundation of that status was built decades earlier, under decidedly mortal conditions. In 1989, he made his debut for India as a 16-year-old boy, walking out to face Pakistan's notoriously lethal veteran pace attack. The reality of that mismatch hit him immediately in Sialkot. A brutal bouncer from 19-year-old fast bowler Waqar Younis struck Tendulkar directly in the face, breaking his nose on impact. The medical staff rushed out, expecting him to retire hurt. Instead, the teenager refused to leave the pitch. He wiped away the blood, took his stance, and scored a match-saving 57 runs. Tendulkar had been given a clear, immediate reason to walk off the field. By choosing to stay, he established a standard for the rest of his career, one where his technical skill was backed by a willingness to endure, regardless of the physical cost. That willingness to suffer yielded its first major dividend less than a year later. In August 1990, the 17-year-old walked out to bat onto the historic, rain-softened pitch of Old Trafford in England. Because he had learned how to survive hostile bowling in Pakistan, he could thrive here. Facing a certain loss, Tendulkar batted for hours to score his maiden international century, an unbeaten 119, and saved the test match for India. He had proven his physical durability. Yet the ensuing 2 decades would test his psychological limits with a severity that a broken bone never could. The pressure of individual performance eventually mutated into the crushing burden of team leadership. By 1997, his tenure as captain hit an absolute nadir during a tour in Barbados, where the Indian team collapsed and was dismissed for a dismal 81 runs. The defeat paralyzed him. Tendulkar locked himself inside his hotel room for 2 full days, entirely devastated, and seriously contemplated quitting the sport. He recovered his footing, but the 1999 World Cup delivered a far heavier blow. Midway through the tournament, Tendulkar received the sudden news that his father had passed away. He flew to India for the funeral. But rather than withdrawing to mourn, he immediately returned to England to play out the rest of the group stage. Days after burying his father, Tendulkar walked out against Kenya and scored an unbeaten 140 runs off just 101 balls, looking up to the sky to dedicate the milestone to his dad. That performance required extreme psychological compartmentalization. He isolated his paralyzing personal grief off the pitch, channeling his focus into a flawless, focused execution on it. He pushed his body to its absolute limits during the 1998 Desert Storm series, fighting through grueling 41 degrees Celsius heat to score back-to-back centuries and single-handedly dismantle the Australian team. But the body has a strict ledger. In 2004, Tendulkar developed severe tennis elbow. The physical pain triggered a mental collapse. Suffering from insomnia, he called friends at 2 a.m., fearing his career was permanently ended. To survive the recovery, he had to build an entirely new coping mechanism. He blocked out all media noise, leaned heavily on his wife's support, and obsessively checked his gear, just to keep his mind anchored. Overcoming this injury forced him to construct a new psychological framework, effectively rebuilding his mechanics and his mindset from zero. By 2010, the 36-year-old veteran was carrying a history of heavy injuries and the natural physical decline of age. At the time, no male cricketer in the history of the sport had ever achieved a double century in a one-day international. The physical stamina required to hit that mark seemed mathematically out of reach in a 50-over format. This chart tracks the highest individual scores over 4 decades. The numbers hit a hard ceiling in the 190s until 2010, when the line spikes to exactly 200 runs. He shattered perceived physical limits, maintaining a relentless scoring pace. The double century provided empirical proof. By reconstructing his mind and refining his mechanics, the aging veteran had actually surpassed the physical output of his youthful peak. He now held virtually every conceivable individual milestone in cricket. Yet the ultimate team prize, the World Cup trophy, had eluded him for 2 decades. The pursuit brought agonizing heartbreak. In 2003, he won the prestigious Player of the Tournament award, but watched helplessly as his team lost the final in a devastating blowout. To 1 billion expectant fans, those individual batting records felt incomplete. Without the validation of the ultimate championship prize, the story was missing its conclusion. That narrative pressure peaked in 2011. The World Cup final was held at the Wankhede Stadium in his home city of Mumbai. It was his sixth and final attempt at the trophy. India won the match, ending an agonizing 28-year championship drought for the nation. In a deeply emotional climax to the tournament, his teammates hoisted him onto their shoulders, carrying him for a victory lap around the stadium he grew up in. The story that began with a broken nose in Sialkot ended with a victory lap in Mumbai. His career is often measured in statistics, but those runs were accumulated through a decades-long process of absorbing pain and refusing to buckle under the weight of a billion expectations.